Okay. Hmm? Jana? We start? No. So I would very much like to welcome everyone on board. Maybe there are still some people who will drop in. And I welcome everyone who came to our rescue vessel Humanity One today for this panel discussion, but I also very much welcome everyone who's watching online currently. We are streaming the panel discussion online as well. My name is Marie Michel. I'm an advocacy manager with SOS Humanity, and I'm very pleased that I will be moderating the discussion today. For everyone who does not know SOS Humanity yet, SOS Humanity is a civil search and rescue organization. We deploy the rescue vessel Humanity One, on which we are currently at the moment in the port of Siracusa. We deploy the vessel in the Central Mediterranean Sea, so on the Central Mediterranean flight route, which means we operate between Libya, Tunisia, Italy, and Malta. And as you can see, I'm not sitting here in front alone, but I have three very nice and interesting panelists with me that I would very much like to introduce to you. So first I have Chiara Denaro with us, who's a researcher and sociologist at the Bologna University and an expert on migration and border studies. She is also a member of ASGI, an Italian association of lawyers working in the field of migration and asylum. And she is also a member of Alarmphone, the civil hotline for people crossing the Central Mediterranean Sea. We are very happy that you're here with us today. Then I would like to introduce to you Sandro Gallinelli, Admiral of the Italian Coast Guard and former officer of the Italian Coast Guard. He's also a lawyer and a legal expert and gave advice to the Italian Maritime Rescue Coordination Center during his time in the headquarters of the Italian Coast Guard. We are also very happy to have you in the discussion. And then lastly, I welcome my colleague, Mirka Schäfer, who is the head of the Advocacy and Citizen Mobilization Department of SOS Humanity. She is also the political spokesperson of our organization and has been on board Humanity One twice already as a human rights observer and actually just returned from the last rotation of Humanity One. So today's panel discussion is titled Humanitarian Aid at Sea, How to Secure Human Rights in the Central Mediterranean. And we want to exchange and discuss with the three of you together today how the situation on the Central Mediterranean Sea developed and how it currently looks like, what are the challenges to provide humanitarian aid at sea at the moment, and also look at possible pathways to look into the future. And for you to understand a bit the format, the panel discussion will take up between 45 minutes to an hour. And afterwards, we will open the space for all of you, both here on board, but also online, for a Q&A. So then you can direct questions to our panelists. Online, you can just put your questions in the chat. And here, of course, you can just get up and raise a question. And we also provide the opportunity for people here on board who feel more comfortable asking their question in Italian. There will be Sandra, my colleague, here in front, who will translate the questions in English, and then we will have whispered translation provided to you for the answers. Yeah, so my first question is directed to you, Sandro. It's been now 10 years since the Mare Nostrum operation, so the Italian state-led rescue operation in the Central Mediterranean, stopped and has ended. And that also means it's been 10 years since civil actors like our organization, SOS Humanity, stepped in to fill this gap that state actors left behind. And you, as an admiral of the Italian Coast Guard who has been engaged in search and rescue activities your entire life and who has been kind of witness to the development of the past 10 years. I would very much like to get your perspective on how search and rescue activities changed, perhaps in these last 10 years on the Central Mediterranean. Speak into the microphone.
Okay. Thank you for having the possibility to tell something that could be useful for the people to understand the problem. Of course, first of all, I have to say that the migration flow at sea in the Central Mediterranean didn't start in 10 years ago, but started before. And just as Mary said, in 2014 ended the Mare Nostrum operation and started the Frontex operation, Triton operation at the European level. And what were the development of search and rescue? Of course, the problem is a political problem. It's not operational. And the problem is not at sea, but it's on land, because it starts on land and finished on land. But at sea, we have only to save life at sea. There is no other possibility. So what happened 10 years ago? 10 years ago, there was a peak in the flow after the African Springs in the Arabic countries in northern Africa. There was a peak of flow from the northern coast of Africa towards Europe. In 2014, there were about 180,000 people arriving into Italy and to Europe. So there was in that period where in 2013 there were some shipwrecks, very impressive shipwrecks. So there was a humanitarian perspective. The people were very sensitive of this humanitarian perspective, and started the search. First, the Mare Nostrum operation was a support to the Italian Coast Guard. Oh.
Sorry, do we need both?
We need both microphones. Unfortunately, one is for online and one is for the audience here.
And so the Mare Nostrum operation was a support to the activity of Italian Coast Guard, because it was along the Central Mediterranean Sea, because there was a problem with Malta. Malta is a tiny island, and they were very worried about their flow towards their island. And so they tried not to rescue people, but to send people towards Italy. And Europe was not very solidarity in Europe. They were not active. And so each country was alone. And if you work alone, of course, you are weaker. And Italy tried with the Mare Nostrum operation to start an operation for search and rescue, but also to fight against the traffickers. Of course, the traffickers are on land, are not at sea, or just for a while at sea. So the problem, the beginning was a very great effort from Italy for it, and then also when after the 2014, when Mare Nostrum ended and started even to support the Italian Coast Guard, because all the SAR operations were coordinated by Italian Coast Guard, and Frontex was not a SAR authority. So but they had means. They are ships, airplanes, and so according to the international law, they supported the activity of Italian Coast Guard to rescue people at sea. How many? But hundreds of people, maybe 800 people, maybe or less, but a lot of people died, not far from Malta. And some NGOs started operating together with Italian Coast Guard and Frontex vessels. But what changed? Probably the problem is that Europe is not a single state. There are many states, member states are not the same point of view. Sometimes we need more Europe if we want to have a common effort. The problem is a big, very big problem. Because I told you, it didn't start 10 years ago, it started before, but in 30 years, what happened? More or less nothing, because the problem is still there. Maybe we have 100,000 people crossing, maybe another year we have 40,000 people crossing, but they are still crossing. In the future, they still will be crossing the sea, because the problem in their land, the root causes of the migration are not cut. They are still there. So
maybe one question more concretely from the operational perspective of the Italian Coast Guard as well. Did it change where the Italian Coast Guard operated and engaged in search and rescue activities throughout the last 10 years?
Yes, the change, the change happened something after the 2017. Why? Because there was the declaration of Libyan search and rescue region. Mm-hmm. And the Libyan search and rescue region, what means? This is an area of responsibility. It's not an area of jurisdiction, so the state has no power on that area, but has the responsibility to save life at sea in that area. The first, not only that state has the responsibility, but it's the first responsibility, the first state that have to act is responsible in that area. And but the Libyan search and rescue region was not a Libyan initiative. Libya had a civil war where there are many problems, but not first problem for them, not to save life of migrants. They are starting voyages at sea towards Europe. But Europe had a need to have a search and rescue region in Libya. Why? To have externalization of border control. So say, if Libya is not a search and rescue region, only European search and rescue central coordination center have the responsibility to act there. Maybe Malta or Italy, because they are the nearest countries at the Libyan area. But if they have a Libyan rescue coordinator center, you have a search and rescue area that is under the responsibility of Libyan authorities, of course there is a problem. It's a Libyan problem, it's not a European problem.
Okay.
That is started the problem now. Now until that year, 2017, Italian Coast Guard operated every day in the Libya that then after became a Libyan search and rescue region, with merchant vessels, with the Triton vessels, with the Italian Coast Guard vessels, with the Navy vessels, and to operate was very heavy duty, because of course the search and rescue center in Rome was not fitted for such a huge responsibility, a huge activity, because every day, maybe 30, 60, even 60 events every day, especially in summertime.
Okay, so what I understand is that there was a kind of rise in arrival, and the consequence of this was that the operational area of where the Italian Coast Guard was operating, due to the externalization of borders by promoting and supporting that the Libyan search and rescue zone will be implemented, it made the responsible area for Italian authorities shrink and externalize search and rescue activities to an actor that acts in a really unstable country with a Coast Guard.
Of course, because this was not only Italian interest, of course, it was a European interest, because the people rescued by European actors, governmental or private actors, even in the Libyan area, have to disembark in Europe, in Italy, Malta, Italy. But
because
Italy
Libya is no place of safety.
Because Libya is not a place of safety. because according with the search and rescue law, is international law, a place of safety is a place that have to be where the people has not threatened, their life has not threatened,
Yes.
there are no bad treatment, of course, in general. And but Libya has not signed, but this is not in the SAR Convention, because the SAR Convention is only for rescuing life at sea. So we have other conventions with the humanitarian, like Geneva Convention, European laws that say that people cannot be.
Yeah, and Libya did not sign these conventions.
The principle
Exactly.
non-refoulement. We cannot
Yes.
send back people in the place their life is
Yes.
a risk and they are at
Okay.
bad treatment.
Okay, thank you. So maybe if we have a bit the development of what might have changed with regards to search and rescue activities in the Central Mediterranean Sea, I would like to direct a question to you, Mirka, because as I said in the very beginning, Mirka just came back from rotation with the rescue vessel Humanity One, on which you're currently finding yourself. And I would like to know...
Sorry, just maybe I just think I can add. Just a way to add that maybe another factor that was influenced this kind of behavior was the terrorist attack. Maybe you see in the 2015, 2016, there were some terrorist attack in Europe, and the people was more scared by security aspects.
That changed the discourse.
And those was also turned the mind of the people from a humanitarian aspect to the security aspect.
Yeah, I agree. This is a super important aspect, that the discourse is well changed. Not only the policies and the cooperation with third states, but also the discourse in society. So, Mirka, again, the question I wanted to direct to you is, you've been just on rotation. We heard about several challenges already for European authorities to take on their responsibility and make sure that human rights are secured in the Central Med. And I was wondering, during your last rotation, but also generally as a spokesperson for SOS Humanity, what are current challenges that you witness in the Central Mediterranean Sea? And how is the situation in the Central Mediterranean? How would you describe it? How did you perceive it during this last rotation?
So we are still witnessing an ongoing humanitarian and human rights crisis in the Central Mediterranean Sea at this very moment. As SOS Humanity, we have been operating in the Central Mediterranean since 2016, so a bit later. But still, we have seen the developments that Sandro just mentioned, the outsourcing of responsibility to third state actors in countries like Libya and also recently Tunisia. And at the same time, even though it might not be in the media all the time, the Central Mediterranean Sea remains one of the deadliest migration routes in the world. At the moment, in this year, on average, 4 people drown every day. And this is only the number that we know about. So there are many invisible shipwrecks where no one is left to report about it later on. There were no eyes and ears to witness what was happening. And this is the current situation still. And I think no one living in Europe can actually say, I didn't know that this is happening at Europe's external borders. It's been a very long time now, and the situation has not improved, on the contrary. During the last rotation with Humanity One, I was on board as human rights observer, and we rescued 333 people from distress at sea in the Libyan search and rescue region. So in an area where formerly the Libyan authorities are responsible to coordinate search and rescue activities. It's an area where of responsibility, as Sandro already said, in international waters. So it's also under jurisdiction of international laws. It's and these laws, this is the maritime law, stating clearly that saving lives is a legal duty at sea. It's a legal duty for all actors at sea, for airplanes, for all vessels, state vessels, NGO vessels, merchant vessels, any kind. And we see that these laws are being circumvented, neglected, violated in the Central Mediterranean Sea on a daily basis. People are being taken back to Libya, to the country, or Tunisia, to the countries where they fled from, by the so-called Libyan Coast Guard that is funded and equipped by the European Union and its member states, and also by Tunisian Coast Guard. We see that states fail to coordinate search and rescue, as is their legal duty at sea, and it's very important that we get all information about distress cases and that this information is relayed to everyone who can assist. So when we are out there with Humanity One, a huge part of our operations is actually the search for boats in distress, for the people in distress. We know they are out there, but it's a huge area and we don't know where exactly they are. And the European member states, Italy and Malta, almost never share information about distress cases, even though time is key and it can decide about life or death, how fast you know. Just a few days ago, there has been a shipwreck close to Lampedusa where the Italian authorities were most likely had been aware 2 days before, but still they didn't react, and approximately 20 people died. And this is happening all over again every day, and this is one of the biggest challenges also, that the erosion of international law, maritime law, human rights law at sea, at our external borders. At the same time, non-governmental search and rescue efforts are being obstructed by European member states. We have seen this since the beginning of our operations, basically, but now there's an escalation since the far-right Italian government took office. There is now the situation where we have to sail to very distant places of safety in northern or eastern Italy. For example, when we had more than 200 people on board in August, these people were all in a very vulnerable state and very difficult health conditions. One people even had to be evacuated for medical reasons with the beginning of organ failure. And still, despite these very vulnerable conditions the persons are in, the Italian authorities assigned us Genoa as place of safety, which was more than 1,000 kilometers from the place of rescue and 4 days of sailing. So we had to sail with people on this deck in extreme heat, and then also during a storm with hail to Genoa. And this risks that the vulnerable condition of the people deteriorates, and the health condition, and it violates their fundamental rights, because all of these people should have access to adequate care and onshore as soon as possible. Under international law, rescue only ends when people can disembark in a place of safety, so when the people can actually go on shore. And this is being delayed in a systematic matter. This practice of assigning distant places of safety also means that us as NGOs, we have to spend money on fuel for long transits that we could otherwise spend for actually rescuing people, and also that it keeps us away from the area of operation where people are drowning at that very moment. Based on our calculations, there have been 600 days lost since this practice has been established. 600 days of operational time where we could have been rescuing lives at sea, where we had to travel to distant ports. This means for all the NGO vessels, not just for Humanity One. So in comparison to a port in Lampedusa or Sicily, which is actually close by, we had to sail to Genoa, Ravenna, Ancona, very far away. And another puzzle piece in the obstruction of search and rescue that we see at the moment is a law that has been introduced in 2023, the so-called Piantedosi law, it's called, and on the basis of this law, NGO vessels have been detained in Italy in 24 cases, and Humanity One has been detained twice already in Crotone, and we went to court because these detentions took place on false allegations. And in one case we won, and the court decided that this detention has been in fact illegitimate. And the other case is still pending. Two rescue vessels, Geo Barents, which is operated by MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, and the Sea-Watch 5 have recently been detained, and luckily we just received the news, very happy news for a change, that the Geo Barents detention has been lifted also in a fast-track appeal by the court of Salerno. So this is also where we can see that standing up for international law and our struggle is also successful.
Thank you, Milka, for this overview. So, I mean, what I heard from you right now with regards to the current situation on the Central Mediterranean is that you, as a human rights observer that has just been on board, you witness several human rights violations while operating the rescue vessel Humanity One, mostly because international actors do not adhere to their obligation to coordinate or to rescue in a proper manner, but also because the humanitarian space in which we as an organization act becomes smaller and smaller and is shrinking because we are being obstructed by, for instance, the two policies that were introduced by the Meloni government, such as the distant port and Piantedosi law. Chiara, now I also want to direct a question to you after Sandro and Milka have been speaking for quite a while. So we heard already of several challenges to provide humanitarian aid at sea, to effectively coordinate, effectively act out search and rescue activities as civil actors. And my question to you as an academic who has been studied, who has studied a lot in the field of migration and asylum, and also to how to secure human rights of refugees who are on the move on the Central Mediterranean Sea. I also would like to know from your perspective, what is or what are currently the main challenges that we are facing in order to make sure that human rights of people fleeing across the Central Mediterranean Sea are protected.
Yes, thank you so much, Marie, for inviting me and yeah, for the question. I think that they said already a lot, but we can summarize, at least in my perspective, the main challenges around, let's say, 4 points. One of them is about, of course, externalization. The second is about the rescue gap that is now in place in the Central Mediterranean. The third one is about the cooperation between also EU states and, let's say, their new approach, the impact of externalization on the reconfiguration of search and rescue policies. And the fourth one is accountability and justice, because basically, yeah, now I will go in deep of each one of them. So first of all, about externalization, there is a problem because we observe a detachment between obligations by international maritime law, human rights law, and asylum law, and soft law tools such as the bilateral agreement between Italy and Libya, or the agreements with Tunisia, or the closed port strategy, or the distant port strategy. There is a rupture somehow. As Mirka mentioned, SOS Humanity recently won an appeal And the judgment by Crotone Court was very interesting because basically one of the main grounds on which civil society that are performing rescue at sea are criminalized is the lack of cooperation with Libyan authorities. And according to the judge, this cooperation was not needed somehow. Why? Because what the Libyan Coast Guard is performing cannot be qualified as rescue. And she, in the decision, is very interesting because she addresses 2 or 3 main points for which what they are performing is not rescue. First of all, because they are not disembarking people in a place of safety. And in that case, it was not even clear where they would have been disembarked. And as already Admiral Gallinelli said, of course, the definition of place of safety, according to international maritime law, concerns, of course, the conclusion of rescue operations, but also in defining the place of safety, it's necessary to take into account human rights law, asylum law, and all the framework applying to the people that are at sea. Because it's very different, the situation, if a Libyan family is going on a Sunday trip and needs rescue in the assignment of a place of safety, and if the people who are rescued, let's say, should be rescued, are exercising the right to live in order to seek asylum. Sorry. And of course, so the first point was the place of safety. And secondly, very interesting, the second point was the modus operandi of the Libyan Coast Guard, because in Italy, the Italian Coast Guard has a long experience in search and rescue procedures. Also, NGOs have been trained on this and are getting more and more specialized on how to approach a boat, how to calm people down, how to ensure that they are not at risk, how to ensure that the transshipment is safe, and whatever. While there, we are seeing something very different. So, Libyan authorities shooting, performing dangerous maneuvers, cutting the way to the boats, raising huge waves that may cause the capsizing of the boat, threatening with weapons, and threatening also the crew of search and rescue NGOs, as it widely documented. So it's something very different from an operational perspective from rescue. So this is one, of course, of the main challenges. Because, of course, in this new approach, in which prevention of departure is the priority, and let's say people have to be intercepted and brought back, there are a lot of human rights concerns and violations that are structurally involved there. The second is about the rescue gap, because of course, after Mare Nostrum, for sure, we saw that some assets were, let's say, assigned a smaller operational area. The operational area was reduced, of course, but in any case, let's say, Italian authorities were used to go very far into the Libyan Zar, were used to intervene very quickly, also in the Maltese search and rescue responsibility, area of responsibility. We saw, for example, in the 11th of October trial, that was the trial for the children's shipwreck occurred in 2013, there was the Guardia di Finanza presenting data about how fast was the intervention by the Italian Coast Guard in the Maltese SAR. And we were talking about 9 minutes to launch the operation sometimes, no? So also the rescue gap is related to the, let's say, lack of intervention by Maltese authorities and a new approach by Italian authorities that are not, let's say, systematically and fasting replacing anymore this gap. And then when it comes to, and also because of course Malta adopts a very different definition of distress. And so there is not an homogeneous approach in defining when an intervention, the launch of a SAR operation is required. But this is also something that is affecting the Italian approach, because until 2017, as data shows data that were available until 2017, but then have been, let's say, gathered through Freedom of Information Act by journalists. As data show, there is an increasing approach in a tendency in qualifying both migrants boats as law enforcement cases. And so, of course, these qualifications leads to different modus operandi. We saw it in Cutro case, for example. And then about accountability, just to conclude. In this scenario, even if there are maybe less naval assets there, we saw that also starting in 2019, the Operation Sophia retired their naval assets.
An EU military operation.
Yeah, the EU military operation retired their naval assets because, of course, the precondition for the Operation Sophia was the disembarkation in Europe. So in the Salvini age, when this was not anymore possible, they also decided to retire withdraw their assets, not to have the problem of where should we disembark the people in case. So, okay, against a reduction of the number of naval assets, there is a lot of aerial surveillance. So Frontex is flying daily search patterns, border management patterns, with at least 3 planes in the central Mediterranean that are usually covering the Tunisian corridor, the Libyan corridor to Italy, and also going in the east, covering the route from Egypt or Lebanon to Crete or Italy. So this agency is daily witnessing this border violence. It's not so easy to obtain the report of their missions. For example, they fill out serious incident reports when there is someone dies or when there are violence, explicit violence. And some of these reports have been leaked by, for example, Fragdenstadt in Germany. And it's really incredible how they are aware perfectly of this violence, how in their internal reporting they assess the human rights violations that were there one by one. So violation of the right to life, violation, prohibition of inhuman and degrading treatments, and whatever. So they witness, they take picture about Libyan Coast Guard shooting and whatever. But there is no accountability for what's going on there somehow. Yeah, and also a huge lack of transparency because, for example, legal actions carried out by civil society NGOs are an opportunity to know more about the chain of command, about who is telling what to whom. For example, in your seizure, there was this information that there were 3 spotting, and the IMRCC Rome was alerting by phone via the Arabic translator immediately Libya. So this is something that it's also we are not so used to read that there is this so quick referral, no? Yeah, so these are, in my view, the main challenges.
So we see it's a complex problem, and the challenges come from many different angles. Also, maybe to add to what you just said about Frontex aerial surveillance, I mean, this is something that we also experience as civil search and rescue organizations, that we see Frontex aircraft deployed in the central Mediterranean, but then not forwarding information on about distress cases to us. So this is also one of the problems, or takes part of the problem that Mirka mentioned before, with the non-coordination of authorities that are responsible to coordinate or responsible to forward information to us. Maybe one point that I would like to talk more in detail with you about, that is one point that you highlighted as a challenge, is like the externalization policies that we see in Libya, but now also more recently in Tunisia. So we know that the European Union and the European member states have been funded and supported the so-called Libyan Coast Guard since 2017. Last year, the European Commission signed a memorandum of understanding with Tunisia and stepped up their support for the Tunisian Coast Guard. And I was just wondering, Mirka, from an operational perspective, maybe you have one example. You also mentioned already shootings, but maybe you can go more into detail. Like, how do we, as a civil search and rescue organization, witness these externalization policies? Like, what are the concrete consequences of these cooperation between European member states and the European Union and third countries like Libya and Tunisia?
So we bear direct witness both when we are at sea as crew members, but also from what people who survived tell us when they come on board. For example, when I was on board here during August, and yeah, there were about 300 people, and most of them, all of them fled from Libya, and most of them had been detained in Libya and told horrific stories about being tortured, beaten up, and they showed also their scars on their bodies, many old wounds from Libya, from their time in Libya, but also from being detained under inhuman conditions. This is something that is widely known, has also been documented by, for example, the UN, by a fact-finding mission that came to the conclusion that there are crimes against humanity committed in Libya against migrants and refugees. And then on the other hand, we also witnessed directly how this EU-funded actor, the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, is acting on scene at sea. For example, in March this year, the armed and masked men of so-called Libyan Coast Guard on a patrol vessel that was donated by Italy 1 year before to Libya, they violently interrupted an ongoing rescue operation of our crew, and people fell into the water, and the Libyan Coast Guard, they fired a shot into the water right next to where people were, and also next to our crew in the ribs, the fast speedboats of our rescue operations. And yeah, they endanger lives repeatedly, they threaten, and this is something that is also increased this year recently. So there have been at least 6 incidents where the so-called Libyan Coast Guard has interfered in rescue operations and of NGO vessels, and threatened, and even at times fired shots. And this was all of these 6 incidents. In these cases, these were boats that were donated and funded by Italy and funded by the EU. And still, despite these evidences, the EU continues to cooperate with Libya and also with Tunisia. So it's kind of like the same model is now being implemented that has been done with Libya, that's now also been implemented with Tunisia. And in this way also the EU is complicit in the human rights violations.
This is enough, thank you. Thank you very much, Mirka. So I understand that when we talk about the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, we are talking about an actor that disrupts orderly professional rescue operations, threatening both people that are in distress, but also crews of our rescue vessels by effectively shooting with guns at us, and that this is an actor that is also funded by the European Union and the member states. Sandro, I would like to know, like from what we just heard, also you mentioned the ruling in Crotone that made clear that the so-called Libyan Coast Guard is not an actor, that was something that was said in the ruling, that the so-called Libyan Coast Guard is not an actor that engages in search and rescue activities how it is laid out in international law, because they don't bring them to a place of safety, because they act with violence against people in distress, etc. I would like to know from you, the European Union and the Italian authorities are still supporting, funding, and cooperating with these actors. How does the cooperation between the Italian authorities and the Libyan authorities actually look like in practice? And also, how is this cooperation justified, although, as we have heard before, and it has been said by the UN with regards to Libya, for instance, although it is clear that Libya and also Tunisia are no places of safety for people rescued in distress?
Well, I try to be clear because it's a very complex issue. But to be clear, I can say externalization of the boundaries is the first thing, because what is the purpose of the European Union? To avoid the responsibility to take people to the European shores.
Yes.
And to have the problems to what to do with the people after the rescue. So the means, I told you before, the means, the first mean was to have a Libyan search area of responsibility. So there is a problem for Libya, and not for Europe. So according with the Search and Rescue Convention, the aim of the Coast Guard, of the Libya, of the Search and Rescue Authority, is to rescue lives at sea. The convention does consider what happened after the rescue. The only thing is the people have to be disembarked in a place where their lives are not no more at risk, but risk at sea. Another convention, of course, other conventions are related for humanitarian rights to avoid the risk for the people after the disembarkation. And but of course, Libya has not. Each state has ratified some convention and are not. Not all the states have ratified all the conventions, international conventions. Libya has not ratified the Geneva Convention, so the European laws, European rules are not valid for Libya authorities. Not all the laws are the same. And this is the trick, because according with the search and rescue, Libya Coast Guard say, I responsible for the this search and rescue region, I rescue the people. Another thing is how they rescue the people, because as America said, and also yes, is the problem is that they didn't act, they don't act really always as a search and rescue operation.
Yes.
Because in search and rescue operation you don't use weapons, you don't use violence, you don't fight to rescue the people, instead to leave the people to another ship. This is why is the interest is from Europe, because it's Europe that want the Libyan act in this way.
Yeah, so the idea
Instead
is to keep people
I think
away.
you have to consider that no European ship, governmental or military ship with European flag, has never disembarked the people rescued at sea in Libya or in Tunisia. Why? Because a European flagged ship is responsible to respect the European laws.
Yes.
So the Europe avoid externalization in the search and rescue, Libyan search and rescue region, Tunisian search and rescue region, are used to say, I'm not responsible. It's a responsibility for Tunisia, for Libya, for the search and rescue point of view, but also for humanitarian rights, because when they are rescued by Libyan authorities, by Tunisian authorities, the respect of their rights, human rights, is in the hands of those authorities, not for the European authorities.
So I understand that the justification of this cooperation
Yes.
goes in the direction
So
of outsourcing the responsibility and justifying by wanting to, like, or by de facto depriving the right of asylum of the people and the right to leave, and trying to keep the people
Yes,
in
as it
third
was
countries.
said before.
I think Milka also wanted to react.
Yes, just to say
Yeah.
that about the aerial surveillance. Aerial surveillance is used for search and rescue purposes, but also to help that the rescue are performed by Libyan or Tunisian authorities and not for other actors.
Okay, maybe Milka.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the non-refoulement principle is still, I mean, it's also valid as customary law, international law. So even though Libya has not signed the Geneva Refugee Convention, it's still valid also for Libya. Of course, we cannot expect much in the current political situation in Libya and with the human rights situation in Libya, but still. And I just also wanted to add that if I pay someone to kidnap someone, I'm complicit in the crime. So I think this is very important. If the EU is funding an actor who is shooting at people at sea and taking them back illegally to a country in violation of international law, the EU is complicit in this crime. And there have been many court rulings that made it clear that no EU actor can take people back to Libya. So this has been recently confirmed by the Italy's highest court in the Asso 29 case. Yeah.
28. 28.
Okay. Where a captain, the captain of a merchant vessel had handed over people to about 100 people to the so-called Libyan Coast Guard and was sentenced by the court for this crime.
Just need this one. Thank you very much. So I think we understood a bit more in detail how the externalization policies work, especially with regards to Libya, but we also encounter this more and more since last year with Tunisia. I think also because we are currently in Italy and we as a rescue organization operate on the escape route Central Mediterranean. If we talk about externalization at this moment, we also have to talk about, at least quickly, about the Italy-Albania protocol, which is a deal that was signed by the government of Italy and the government of Albania last November and was then passed in the Albanian and Italian parliaments in February and is supposed to be implemented already this year. And it kind of presents a new form of how to externalize borders and externalize migration policies and also shift away responsibility, which we heard now in different forms already by the speakers here at the panel. And I would like to ask you, Chiara, also because especially if people are watching from Germany, maybe people might not have heard about this protocol yet. Maybe you can explain to us what this protocol is about. And also, because this is our focus today, how does the protocol make sure that human rights of protection seekers will be protected and secured?
Yeah, thanks a lot. This question is difficult because also here in Italy we have no clear vision about what the protocol is about and how it will be implemented. First of all, okay, the protocol established an area of Italian jurisdiction on the Albanian land. And this is something new somehow. So basically, it will work like, for example, the Spanish enclaves in Morocco. So yeah, the Italian law will be applied there. And there will be a detention center of about 300 places and a prison with very few places and a reception center. The reception center, one of these reception centers includes some places for women and vulnerable population. And this is important because according to the law, these people could not go there. So maybe they imagine what is very much possible so that they won't be able to identify the so-called vulnerable populations or persons with specific needs, as UNHCR called them, on board. And let's go to what I mean with on board, because yeah, maybe it's interesting to look at the Italy-Albania agreement from a search and rescue perspective, as we are on a ship, based on the few information that we have. So according to the protocol, this agreement should apply to migrants who are rescued in international waters by naval assets of Italian authorities. So this is the first point, let's say, because NGOs are not mentioned. these people, so falling into these categories, should be transferred to the Albanian territory under the Italian jurisdiction. But a first question is, and then there is another limitation, so that this transfer should be applied only to migrants coming from safe countries of origin that, according to the Italian law, are listed. And it's a list that is going to be enhanced, more or less, to cover all the possible nationalities of people who are crossing the sea. Anyway, the safe country concept is very contested, but I don't want to open this door here. Maybe later. And the other limitation is that this transfer cannot be applied to people who are, let's say, belonging to vulnerable categories, let's say persons with specific needs that are listed in the so-called reception directive, EU reception directive, that was adopted by the Italian law. So there is the legislative decree 142 of 2015, Article 17 lists all these categories that are basically single-headed household, minors, unaccompanied minors, pregnant women, persons with mental health issues, elderly persons, persons with serious physical illnesses, persons with disability, victim of torture, SGBV survivors, and victim of trafficking. Then to this list, UNHCR generally adds shipwreck survivors and LGBTIQ possibly related asylum claims. So a huge list. Now, in my life, I've been working as a specific needs expert for the UNHCR here in Italy, and I was tasked to identify persons with specific needs at the disembarkation. So I can tell you that this is super difficult already at the disembarkation, because when people are coming, I mean, some of these specific needs are visible. If there is a person with disability, of course, you can notice. Or if there is a pregnant woman, maybe after the 6 months, you can notice. If there is a single-headed household, you can notice. But, I mean, identifying a victim of trafficking takes a lot of time. Maybe it's not possible, not even at the Territorial Commission in Italy, when people are presenting an asylum claim and are telling their stories. And what about SGBV survivors, especially against men? That is something that is a taboo topic that could never emerge. Or what about mental issues? It's hyper difficult to identify them at the disembarkation. I cannot even imagine how can they do it on board.
Even the nationality.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, of course. And then, I mean, because we imagine that they will, let's say, rent some private vessels as for the quarantine ship to do this transshipment, because we don't imagine that the Italian Coast Guard will give their assets as the Diciotti, the Gregoretti, or Dattilo, that are only 3 or 4 for huge emergencies that will be used for this transfer, becoming ferry lines. So there will be maybe private ships, we can imagine. And there are also call for tenders for these ships. But yeah. And then there is the issue of the nationality, because of course, also the identification procedures, it's something that should happen forcibly on land. So the plan to limit, to discern amongst migrants to be transferred to Albania and those who would be not eligible, it's fantascientific plan. Anyway, yeah, I think...
I understand that the difficulty is that protection seekers are supposed to be brought to Albanian territory that works under Italian jurisdiction, will then de facto be detained, and therefore specifically vulnerable groups are not supposed to go there, but then we are in front of the practical problem that we cannot assess on board of a ship the vulnerabilities.
So firstly, to select the people, to do this selection on board in IC of those who should go to Albania and those who should not is a problem. Secondly, as the Albanian centers should be under the Italian jurisdiction, this is another problem, because as you maybe know, in Italy there is an ongoing attempt following the so-called Cutro decree So they attempt to apply these new border procedures. The first attempt was and for this purpose, they are opening new places of detention, places of confinement that are not properly pre-removal center. As is in Sicily, it was Trapani, and there is still Caltanissetta. But other places such as Modica, Pozzallo, not Pozzallo, the hotspot, the other center in Modica. Then we have Porta Empedocle, the hotspot, and near a detention center, let's say. So these new places should be dedicated to border procedures. When they tried in Modica, Catania Court clearly defined these procedures not applicable, but now let's say the match is moved to Palermo Court, because now they are trying to apply the same border procedures in Porta Empedocle, and the court of reference is Palermo. That has been validating some of these measures. Yeah,
and maybe
of course, rejected, because just to conclude, basically, these border procedures are imagining a system in which a person who is seeking asylum coming from a so-called safe country is automatically detained if he or she cannot pay an economic warrant, let's say, of around 5,000 euros. So now the legitimacy from a constitutional perspective of this warrant is before the European Court of Justice. Yeah, and then very last thing is that basically now they are trying to apply these border procedures to very specific cases. One of them is autonomous landing, because they cannot prove that the person tried to cross, let's say, the border in an not authorized way if there was a rescue, first of all. So eligible, they are trying to find this autonomous landing. And then also autonomous landing failed because were not validated as detention measures. And so now they are trying with those who violated the re-entry the re-entry prohibition. Okay, that's all.
maybe we pass the micro. You wanted to say something, right? Wanted to add something?
I wanted to add the concerns that we also have as a search and rescue NGO regarding this protocol with Albania. So we are very concerned, as Chiara already mentioned, about the human rights violations that inevitably will happen, and especially also about the delays of disembarkation that will happen systematically, because people will be taken about 1,000 kilometers again to Albania instead of to the closest place of safety, as according to international law. And also, I think we should talk about the huge cost of this project. It's going to be about 670 million euro for the next 5 years. And this money could be used to actually save lives at sea, for a European search and rescue program, and for protecting refugee rights instead of violating them.
Another thing we had, because I was interested to know that the people in Albania centers, if they are not repatriated in their origin country, in the short time provided by the law, there is more or less 28 days or maybe, they have to be sent back to Italy. So it's not like the Rwanda plans for England. This is a different kind of perspective.
Yeah, so I mean that really also shows how much, apart from being a big threat to human rights for protection seekers that arrive or try to cross the Mediterranean Sea, it's also just not really feasible, like when we look at the cost, and also about like then people will be brought to Italy, so it's kind of absurd. Thank you very much. We are already a bit over the time, but I wanted to ask you all a last question, and we'll ask you to be very, very short and maybe focus on one point. Because after everything that we heard, I have the feeling you all painted a kind of dark picture when it comes to human rights of protection seekers in the Central Mediterranean Sea. Like we heard about how human rights are violated on a daily basis due to externalization policies by European authorities, but also by non-coordination, non-information sharing, making the work of us as civil actors at sea very difficult, and not adhering to the international obligations to rescue and to effectively coordinate rescues. We also heard about how for the civil actors that only stepped in because the European states do not adhere to this obligation to rescue at sea, that civil actors had to step in, and then still civil actors like SOS Humanity are being systematically obstructed and hindered in providing this humanitarian aid that is so much needed on the escape route Central Mediterranean. So to not only end with all what we heard that is the threat and how much the human rights are eroding in the Central Mediterranean, I wanted to ask you if there's like, what for you would be a pathway forward? Like, is there one or two things that you think this should be changed now? Yeah, and I very much ask you to be very short so that the audience online and here on board also has time to ask questions.
Yeah, I will be short. For me, well, we don't have the solution, but for me, the work, the legal battlegrounds that are ongoing are, yeah, let's say something that should be necessarily continued. Because they are not only able to challenge from a juridical perspective something that doesn't work, but they are also somehow, if well amplified, able to affect the narrative about migration. For example, the criminalization of NGOs involve an overturning, an inversion of the narrative. In the appeal it was called in Italian mistificazione dei fatti. So basically they are transforming civil rescuers in those who are endangering people in front of a situation in which people, authorities are cooperating with those who are really putting lives in danger. So legal struggles are also useful to correct the narrative, let's say. And then, I mean, they are transversal, because, for example, another battlegrounds that, let's say, struggle that needs to be done is that about the distant port strategy. Because if, for example, you manage to challenge this approach by saying, I don't know, that really sending people so far undermines rescue as something that has to be provided in a timely manner, as near as possible, and so on and so forth. This can be applied then to Albania. There are some transversal lines. So I think that one of the tools is to keep bringing forward legal struggles.
Yeah, you can pass over to Sandro.
This is of course, this is a political issue. It's not operational issue. So the problem is to understand that the problem is not now. The problem is in the future, especially. So now we have to react in the proper way, looking forward. So the people will move. They don't stop moving just because we have externalization now boundaries. The people will still move because they have there are root causes that are to be fighting. And another thing that this is a very difficult solution, of course. We need a single state cannot solve the problem. We have to be together. Only together we can win this problem. And it's a long-term solution anyway. So we need to do something. Waiting to find a solution for this problem, we have to do something. The first thing to do is rescue people. And the other thing is to cooperate, to avoid that the people with transiting countries are endangering the life, the people, to change the behavior against the migrants. And also you find that Libya, if Libya would be stabilized, Libya is a rich country. In Libya, before the fall of Gaddafi, worked about 2 million of people, migrants. So they can be a place where the people, the migrants can find work. But we need stabilization. So this is, but European countries like Russia, or like Afro-European countries like Turkey, and the European other countries, they are fighting for different interests. It's not working together to find a solution.
Yeah.
So this, for our political point of view, we have to make our political representative conscious of this problem.
Yes.
In this way.
I agree, it's a political issue, and this is also why we as European civil society, we need to stand up against the inhumanity at sea. And it's a very difficult time, I think, for Hope, because we see the right-wing parties on the rise in the European countries, and fear and hatred is spreading. But at the same time, it always gives me hope to be on board and to see all the people coming from so many different backgrounds, from so many different countries, spending their time and money to stand up for saving lives at sea. And I think this is very important, and we need to continue, and we need to continue to also change the narratives that are being spread by right-wing forces. And I agree, it's also about the legal, we need to challenge legally, we need to advocate for change on the political level, and I think this is something we need to do all together.
Yeah, thank you very much for this last round, and also for keeping it short. I think it's very nice, like the combination of the things you said, that we have to tackle the problem from various angles. So one is the legal angle, comes back to what you said in the beginning, like we have a problem of accountability as well, but wherever there are means to hold the authorities responsible, we have to try by legal means. Then of course, as you said, we cannot stop to rescue people in distress. This is our obligation under international maritime and human rights law, and our obligations according to our humanitarian principles, and this is of course what we as SOS Humanity will never stop doing. And then what you said, I think, is also maybe something that can be addressed to every individual that is here and that is online, is that we are the civil society, and it is our duty to speak up and to also not shut our eyes, not to ignore the problem, because this is also, we talked about that before the discussion. This is something that the European Union and the European member states and the right-wing narratives are trying to make us look away. And I think it's very important that in civil society we will not look away. And yeah, I think that's a good way of closing the discussion. And I thank you very much again for coming here and for exchanging with us. And I would now open the floor for you as an audience to, yeah, maybe there's a round of clapping for our panelists. I think I just, hello. Well, I will, yeah, it works again. I pressed the button. Yeah, I would like to open the floor now to all of you. So if anyone has a question, feel free to ask the question. Perhaps there have been questions asked in the chat already. I will try to mix a bit questions from the online participants and the people here. And I invite Sandra maybe to come on stage as well, because she's willing to translate questions that will be asked in Italian into English, if you feel more comfortable speaking Italian. And then there will be Flor, who can also provide whisper translation for you, you might need it. So the question is, if anybody has a question to ask.
You should tell it in Italian also, that they can...
Maybe you can tell it in Italian quickly. Yeah, that's true. It makes sense.
Ciao, adesso per chiunque volesse aprire domande anche in italiano, it's weird. Sono qua pronta a tradurre ai nostri panelist, quindi sentitevi liberi di parlare.
Thank you.
In inglese.
Yes.
worries me, I'm English.
Do you mind?
I thought I could shout. What worries me, being English and watching what is going on in the Channel, and it is very political, as you were saying a moment or two ago. I pushed it. Is that better?
I think that's, I can
Push it
turn
again.
it on again. Most important is this one.
Yeah, all right.
You can continue speaking loudly. This is just for the audience here.
Okay. Yes, as I say, what worries me is the political side, but what drives the political side over and above the right lobby, which is in many ways really quite, one, disturbing and two, close to disgusting, is the practical side. The practical side in England, and I think it is the same in other parts of Europe, is where and how we finance the migration in our own countries. And we're having terrible trouble. The numbers are coming across the Channel, and it is very similar here, across the Maltese Channel, as we call this piece of water here. And I just wonder how the panel views the practical side. Once the migranti get to Italy or they get to another country, it is the accommodation, it is the food, it is the reception of the people, and so often perception of those people who feel that jobs are being stolen. They are not generally being stolen. They go into all sorts of avenues of work. They are the lifeblood of most countries. So it'd be interesting to understand from the panel how they view the practicalities of this.
Thank you. Try to keep it short, because we're very short on time.
So I think there's an example where we can see how it can actually work, and the European Union made it work in the example of Ukrainian refugees. So the Temporary Protection Directive was activated and is still being implemented, where Ukrainian refugees can move freely and are granted protection in the European Union. And of course, this has also been done with a huge effort of civil society, taking people in even for housing. And this is showing that when there's a political will, there's also a way. But at the moment, the European Union is focusing on externalization, outsourcing responsibility, on deterrence, on closed-door policies. And these policies are causing deaths. And they cause a lot of suffering. For example, the reception centers and also the border procedures that were mentioned before. This is showing that people are being kept and detained also in the European Union. People who would like to work and who would like to be a member of this society are being kept from doing so. So it is not so much about that there are no means to do so. It is a way of how we deal with it. Do you want?
Yeah, another reflection being here in Sicily is that, I mean, in Italy we don't have a problem of reception, of lack of places, of in the past the North African emergency, so-called, was faced with a lot of involvement of mafia-related also cooperatives turning B&B, etc., and so on and so forth. And but anyway, a lot of new places, facilities were created. And anyway, these facilities, many of them are empty actually, because now there is a filtering mechanism that is in the hotspot approach. So when people arrived in Lampedusa, they are divided into asylum seekers, non-asylum seekers, and amongst the non-asylum seekers, there are some, like the Tunisians, that are easily repatriable, and many others that are just left in the street with a 7 days order to leave the Italian territory. And some of them are trying to reach France, Germany, England, and to try again. Or maybe they don't want to stay in Italy, but many of them are just left here in Italian we say alla mercé, so at the mercy of, let's say, caporali or other managers of agricultural settlements that are exploiting. So the governments, by making so difficult the access to a legal status and documents and whatever, is just creating exploitable workforce that then we see in the informal settlements without lights, without energy, without rights and whatever. So providing people with more rights, with the right to stay, will also facilitate them in accessing the laboral system and easily, so just become, let's say, a resource for the territory and not a person who is in the streets because it's in a legal limbo.
Does anyone else has a question?
Certo.
Ho capito che in pratica io ho capito in un certo senso quello che dice lei. In pratica in Italia loro non vogliono stare, preferiscono andare all'estero. Tanti vogliono andare in Germania, in Francia, in Olanda. Noi siamo delle missionarie, loro sono delle suore missionarie, io sono una laica e lavoriamo tanto con loro, con i migranti, ma negli hotspot, ma loro qui arrivano e poi vogliono andare fuori dall'Italia perché sono alla mercé dei caporalati, lei lo sa benissimo, lavoro non ce n'è, sono super sfruttati, ci cercano il lavoro a noi, ma noi non siamo un'agenzia di lavoro, siamo solo dei volontari. Quindi ho capito questo, che in pratica loro in Italia non vogliono stare, o quantomeno poi come sono alla mercé della malavita, della mafia, soprattutto è il manodopera per la mafia, soprattutto. Oppure nei campi, ma nei campi vengono pagati, che ti posso dire, noi lo sappiamo, vengono pagati niente, 2-3 euro l'ora dalle 7 del mattino fino alle 5 del pomeriggio per niente, per 30 euro al giorno, sotto il sole. Sai, in Sicilia arriviamo a 45 gradi e quindi appena possono o vanno via o sono alla mercé. Purtroppo questo. Ok?
Grazie. It's correct. I said exactly this.
You want me to translate it or you can translate it?
I should translate for it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, can you translate the question just quickly, maybe wrap it up?
It was more a statement, I guess.
Yes.
The person that talked is part of a missionary association that works in Sicily. And after talking with a lot of migrants, they understood that many of them don't want to stay in Italy. They're willing to go maybe in the Netherlands or the Nordics countries. And usually they go with the mercy of staying in Italy and being involved in criminal organization, which is a big problem in Sicily with mafia. And so what is the solution there? I guess that's maybe the point.
Is there someone you
Yeah,
would
I mean-
like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we fully agree. I mean, we have the same opinion. So I don't know what I can add to what Milena said. Yeah, because we fully agree. Many people want to go ahead, want to exercise the right to choose where to live, as the Syrian refugees in the past told us so clearly with their banners on the merchant vessels in 2014. And some others maybe would like to find dignified conditions here, but the informal settlements and the agricultural settlements, don't allow.
Yes, maybe add something, like the Englishman said before, no? Because in England they came from France, not from Libya. So the internal movement between the different countries is like to send the ball to the other country instead of working together to find a solution together. And so we need, for this reason, we need a legal path. We have to provide a legal path. And to avoid, to fight the traffickers, we need a legal path, because it's an economic reason.
Yeah.
Because you have to decrease the demand of trafficking, because the people have no legal path, or no other choice that to go to the traffickers. And that is the reason, because we have to work together to find a solution together. All the countries have to work together to find a solution, to have provide not only just to send the people to the other side, like in Italy. They want to stay in Italy. Some people want to stay in Italy, but many want to go in other countries. So we cannot. So the problem now in Germany, no? Germany said they want to close the borders, no? Schengen agreement want to close the border. Why? Because of course now they say the internal movement, they cannot send back the people in the countries of origin as provided by the Dublin regulation. So we have to have a different approach. We have need real solidarity as provided by the European law. We need solidarity, but real, active.
See? Okay. Does anyone else have?
No, no, dicevo, poi parliamo italiano.
See, you speak Italian later. There will still be time to meet later when the.
Tra virgolette, purtroppo questa realtà, perché sono più di 3 anni che ci lavoriamo in un certo senso, quindi la conosciamo bene, le situazioni sono pesanti, anche se non tutti vengono per il bisogno, la necessità, perché scappano da questo, non tutti, cioè anche, e si vede, cioè l'Hot Spot a Siracusa, l'hotel Siracusa, l'anno scorso a novembre sono arrivati quasi 300 persone. Allora, l'hotel Siracusa è un hotspot, è un centro di prima accoglienza. Erano in tanti, erano 300. Io ho avuto pure paura, cioè è stato un attimo perché. E comunque quelli che in effetti hanno bisogno, che scappano dalla guerra, sono visibili, si vedono. Però nel mezzo ci sono pure quelli che vengono invece per fare danno, e si vedono pure, e si vedono, e ci sono. E questa è una piaga grandissima, e noi ce ne rendiamo conto, perché da una parte ti immedesimi e hai quella cosa, però anche poi dici, ma cioè, abbiamo anche noi i nostri problemi qua in Sicilia, tantissimi problemi, tanti, e purtroppo è così comunque. Ok, grazie.
Do you want to
Yeah, I will summarize.
maybe summarize, and then we maybe have another question, and I think then we will have to close the Q&A.
We can change and go to the next question, actually.
Yeah.
Traduco. To summarize what Milena said, is that usually, for example, she was explaining about the hotspot in Syracuse. She's not a hotspot. It's at first reception. Half of the people she found there, she met, were there because they needed, and half of them were there according to their eyes to become criminals somehow. So it's like a big topic for Sicilian society, civil society, to understand which people are coming with the real need and which ones are here to maybe be involved in criminal organizations.
You want to quickly react to this?
So according to European law, we have asylum laws and the individual right to asylum, and this asylum request will be assessed on an individual basis, and this is very important also because we can never know, and it takes time to evaluate why a person flees and its individual reasons. For example, we on board Humanity One, we did a survey on board with persons who were rescued, and they shared with us that they all had several reasons to flee their home countries, overlapping reasons, and each story is unique. And we have these rights, and for people to this human right to asylum, and it's very important that this is also adhered to in the European Union in an individual level. And this does regarding being criminals. I think this is something that we see a lot in the narrative around, and I think it's linked to what Sandro said in the beginning, also the securitization approach, and it's first of all, if people request asylum, they have the right that this is processed in the way that's foreseen in the European law, and and second, if we don't in the European Union, if we fail to provide this fly, if we fail to provide people with access to their basic rights, then of course also there might be more criminality, because people do not have access to work, so they are somehow in the grey sector or in an illegalized sector working because they don't have access to work, a working permit. And this is something I think is very important to talk about in this context.
Okay,
very
quickly.
quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very quickly. I think that it's true that people are different amongst them, but I also think that also if you go in a poor neighborhood in Palermo, as Lausanne, or if you go in Catania, or if you go in Siracusa, you will see differences in the eyes of the people, for sure. And also, it's the same amongst migrants. We also have to keep in mind that there are many common lines. In Tunisia, as in Italy, maybe people have been suffering a continuum of violence. That means structural no access to health, to job, to food, to education. And so, I mean, the differences in the gaze that we see, it's related to this. And so I think it's important for the civil society to build bridges between these sufferings that emergence. For example, in Palermo, we had a squat in which there were Italian families and migrants just came from the sea. And it was very difficult to create bridges between them. But how much better a migrant who was evicted several times from settlements and so on can be better understood by a family that was evicted from a squat and that grow up in a squat in Italy. So I think it's very important to build bridges between different forms of violence and sufferance and resilience also.
Thank you. So we are a bit over the time, but maybe I would allow one last question, maybe a short and concise question, if someone still has a question from the audience. Like so far online, I think there are no questions posed. There we have a question. There we have a question. Perfect.
What are the main nationalities that you observe on board when you rescue people? And have you seen like a change in the main countries of origin, originating people fleeing their homeland?
During the last rotation in August, we had people from 15 different countries of origin on board Humanity One. Of course, this is only a glimpse of the overall situation. According to UNHCR, who is monitoring arrivals via sea to Italy, the main nationalities this year are people from Bangladesh, from Syria, and from Tunisia. And this is subject to change from year to year. But, for example, we see that there are more people crossing the Mediterranean Sea at the moment from Syria than last year. Yeah, this is a situation that is very fluid and changing. And on board Humanity One, of course, we only have a glimpse because we have rescued so far over 3,300 people, and a quarter of them are minors. And many people come from so many different countries, so many different spoken languages, and of course it's linked to the situation in their home countries. And but for Syria, for example, we know that this has been a long time war zone, and now there has been an increase, but still has been a long time going on.
Okay, so I would like to say thank you again to foremost you, the three of you, for talking to me today, and also for all of you who came on board Humanity One, also for the ones who are still with us online. And maybe to add, I mean, you can still wander around a bit, and there will also be, regarding your question, like we just published 2 months ago this report, Humanity Overboard, where you can find also statistics from the most, like the biggest countries of origin of people that we rescued with our rescue vessel, Humanity One. So feel free to go to the table and take a flyer and talk to us, talk to the panelists, and thank you very much for having been with us today. Okay. We can turn it off, right?
No question online.